And once again, greetings unto you, beloved and holy friends, those that have journeyed with me since before time is, and those who will remain with me after the purpose of time has been completed, and the things of space and time are needed no longer, and dissolve away into the source from which they have arisen, and the holy child of God remains eternally one with its Creator. This cannot be described in the languages of your world, and yet by faith and with vision, the heart can see and sense and know that surely creation holds a purpose. Surely it will know an end to the things that reflect creation in time, but not an end to creation itself. For creation is but the unlimited extension of the love of God in perfect union with God's only creation, His beloved child, you, the one heart of Christ, shared by all, beyond the body, beyond personality, beyond your dreams of a history that you think still is carried with you. For these things have been taken from you, and you remain as you are created to be. And yet within the dream of time and of space, even as you have known birth into this world, so too did I come and took birth within time itself. And I came as you have come. I came not as one who was already a master far above you. I came to be as you are. I came forth, therefore, from the womb of a woman. I came forth, and legend notwithstanding, indeed I screamed and cried as every newborn babe does. I came to learn hunger and cold. I came to learn to feel the subtle energies of those around me. I came to wonder at the way a bird flies through the sky. I came to marvel at the way the sunlight dances across the waters. I came to marvel at the gift of song and of dancing and of celebration that would seem to well up through the souls of those that I saw around me. I became troubled as I looked upon many and saw veils of pain and of doubt and of guilt, and wondered, where have these things arisen from? For indeed I came forth and chose, even as you have chosen, to be birthed into a time frame, into a culture upon this earth, in which the simple truth was always taught: God is but one, and God is love. And yet the kernel of this simple message seemed to be veiled and veiled and veiled and veiled. Complexity upon complexity upon complexity. Some would say that the Lord thy God is a jealous God. And I could not understand this. For when I journeyed and sat beside the calm waters and watched the sunlight dancing across them, when I heard the song of a bird, when I heard the voice of my mother, I could not comprehend that God was jealous, that God could want anything but the expression of the love that He is. And I looked upon my own people, and indeed I was troubled. But he that searches does find, and when you find, you will be troubled. And that troubling creates an opening in which you ask more deeply than ever before, Father, show me thy face, teach me thy truth, that thy will might be done through me, that creation might be restored to you. Therefore, in this hour, I come to share gently with you the simplicity of the truth that you are as I am and have been even in the field of time. I have felt the things that you have felt. I have questioned the things that you have questioned. I looked upon the political structures of my age and wondered, why this feeling of insanity? Why this fear? Why the attraction of power that can never satisfy? Is it not enough to feed those who are hungry and to embrace those who are alone? Therefore, and because I chose birth into a family fully dedicated to discovering and expressing the love of God, I was given many teachers. And as a child, I was taken to many teachers. There were many factions within the Jewish community of that day. One such group was what you would know as the Essenes. And unlike what many of your current scholars would say, the Essenes were not just merely a sect that separated themselves from the main population. Yes, indeed, they had their monasteries, they had their communities apart, but there were many Essenes who lived within the Jewish population of that time, who lived in the cities and who were carpenters and fishermen, who were merchants and teachers and, yes, even rabbis. For the Essenes simply represented a core or an essence of a teaching that sought to restore the Jewish family to an ancient knowledge that man is one with the earth, and that it is by honoring that connection that the soul reawakens to the truth of its dependence, not just on the earth and things of time, but on God as the source and the creator of all. The Essenes therefore taught me how to find attunement with the body itself, how to heal the body, how to balance the body, how to listen to its subtle messages, how to utilize the gifts of fasting and of prayer and of meditation, to correct the subtle imbalances that come only truly from the mind and from its fears and doubts. By the age of 5, I was already being taken to certain teachers, both within the monastic tradition of the Essenes and also to teachers that lived in Judea and in also Jerusalem. One such teacher is one known as Joseph of Arimathea. This one also was a distant uncle, a part of my own family. He had achieved what you would call great wealth in the merchant trades, but was also a man of high standing within the Jewish community. Often I would spend time with him. My parents would simply leave me with him. And even at that age, he would begin to chant to me the heart and essence of Judaism. God is but love, and you are fully dependent upon that source of creation. Therefore render every decision unto him, trusting that love will guide you. Even as a child, these thoughts began to plant their seeds within me. At the age of 7, I made my first journey with my mother and the one who had come to be as my father and my uncle. Because of his wealth, he arranged to take us by boat, and we journeyed forth to that which you would now know as England. We went to study with certain groups to begin to reveal to me the perceptions of various groups in their attempts to understand the mystery of creation, in their attempt to relink themselves with the source of creation, to study their ways, to feel their perceptions, if you will, to learn. Therefore, indeed, we journeyed forth. And in my first experience in that land, I was introduced to the priestly caste. You have heard of the term the Druids. this energy, this basic strand of approaching the Creator and creation goes back a very, very long ways. As I spent time with them, having already learned to rest in innocence, making no judgment, but feeling and listening and learning through empathy, I came to see that there seemed to be a fundamental energy that pervaded their entire approach to the mystery of God. They sought to align themselves with the energies of the earth, and yet, while this is perfectly okay, I began to detect that there was a subtle hope in gaining mastery or power over the subtle sources of energy in this creation. And as I began to feel that, I questioned more deeply, Holy Spirit, given unto me of God, bring wisdom that I might understand what I am feeling. And I began to sense and to see and to know that while the intention of this strand had indeed been good at one time, the mind of man, the ego of man, can take anything and turn it for its own devices. And therefore there was a subtle intention of seeking power over nature, accessing certain powers in order to gain power or control over others. It was not an overt or an evil thing, only a misperception. I stayed with them upon that journey for a period of 9 months, and then we journeyed back to Judea. I brought with me many questions and the memories of all that had been shared with me. I was guided then to spend much time journeying into the desert, to begin to learn the practice of resting in prayer and meditation alone. And if any of you have ever tried it, you know that fear comes up. When there you sit in the midst of a grand darkness, the things seen with the eyes by day have disappeared, and certain sounds seem to come, and even the wind brings fear within you. And I was taught that these are but as demons, though you would not call them that today, psychological fears, arising within me that needed to be transmuted and healed, to trust the voice for God in all circumstances. So even as a child, I was guided to begin this practice of leaving the roar and the din of the world to seek a place of solitude, to reestablish my knowing connection with the source of all of creation that I came to call as Abba, Father. And Abba doesn't mean just Father. It evokes and carries a sense that the source of creation holds an intimate and direct relationship with every aspect of creation. That God was not just an abstract energy, but a personal being through which there could be communication in the depth of the soul. I studied much with the Essenes and learned much from them. But also I felt that often there was a subtle underlying energy of fear. There would be a tendency to make judgment of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and indeed a subtle hatred of those that had come to our land, the Romans. And I could not reconcile this subtle underlying energy with the simplicity of the truth that I found when I read the Torah. God is but love. Therefore, I asked to seek further. And going then to my uncle once again, who was very much like a spiritual preceptor for me, as he began to see that my questioning was maturing, that I needed to seek out and understand, he made arrangements. And I went with, again, my family, my parents, to what you know as Egypt. And there were then at that time also groups, collectives of Essenes who were aware of me, even though I was not aware that they were aware, that I had a mission to fulfill in this life. I was growing and evolving into that mission. And so we journeyed forth. And there I was introduced to the priesthood at that time. And I asked them questions, and I watched their rites, and I listened to them, and I spoke deep into the night with their philosophers, if you will. And here again, and even to a greater degree, I found what we'll call here a dependence on magic. For the rites that had been passed from generation to generation in that strand, that culture, had come again to hold the greater power. That the rites themselves, the rituals themselves, held the power, and that it was through the correct behavioral methods that you could unlock the powers, whether it be in stones, in crystals, or staves, or chants. This did not feel appropriate for me. And yet, now that I was at the age of about 11, as I questioned the priests, they would become greatly troubled. And they went into my uncle and said, "Take this one from us. This one is not quite ready to learn what we have to teach." My uncle smiled. "We will journey back to our home." He knew that I was troubled on the journey, as still my mind and my heart sought to understand, why is there this difficulty? My Father is but love. I was quiet and sullen on the journey home. And when I was received back at home, I went back to my father's shop, the little carpenter shop. I was never a very good carpenter, by the way. I was somewhat preoccupied with other things. And my father, unlike the tradition of that time, did not insist that I remain with him in the shop. And when he felt that I was being pulled to journey into the hills, to meditate, to pray, to walk, to go and to speak with others, he would just let me go. And many of his friends would come to him and say, "That son of yours is never going to be a good carpenter. Discipline him a bit more." He would smile and say, "He is called by a different voice." There were some that understood that and supported me, but there were many who were greatly troubled by what they perceived to be my rebelliousness, my lack of discipline, my lack of a sense of duty to tradition. I journeyed back, first to Egypt and then back to Judea, where I set about seeking out those who would support me and walk with me. You have known these as disciples. I prefer to call them friends. The abilities had been awakened within me, and here we would speak for a moment of what many of you call chakras or subtle abilities, and as these energy centers open, the mind, the heart, can indeed access levels of knowingness that seem to have been previously veiled. As I sat in prayer, what you would call meditation, I merely asked, "Holy Spirit, what would you have me do this day?" And a picture would come, and I would see one standing by the shores of the lake, a simple fisherman. And I knew immediately I was to make contact with that one. And so I arose and I journeyed forth. It was a several hour walk through the heat of the day. And I arrived at the shores of what you would know as the Sea of Galilee. And there indeed was a fisherman. Not a fisherman completely unknown to me, but one who is indeed part of my family, a cousin. This one's name was John. And he arose from his work with his nets and he looked at me. He had not seen me since I had made my long journey. And yet as he looked into my eyes, he knew that much had changed. And in our gaze, there was what you would call a communication in the depth of the soul. And he knew that the time was at hand. Something compelled him then to look upon me and say, well, what do we do now? And I said, follow me. Now in time, and to keep the story short, a certain group was gathered around me. You've been told that there were 12 disciples. Fundamentally, this is true, but there were actually much closer to a few hundred. And the vast majority of those numbers were women, not men. Because it was through the feminine that the simplicity of the gospel that I was to restore could be heard and understand and felt through the feminine nature, because my gospel was the simplicity of love, the simplicity that God and His creation remain as one, and that each simple act of love is sacred, for it is through the feminine, the woman that can understand what it means to prepare the simplicity of a meal and give it with love without asking anything in return. The men would often spend much time quibbling over the theological meaning of a simple parable, a simple story, while the women would smile and nod their heads, say, this one's journey to ancient lands, to that which is called India, has served this young Jeshua well. His heart is opened. He feels the simplicity of the truth. And yet they too knew that in that culture, what they would teach would not be received. Therefore, the simplicity of the gospel of the heart must yet come through a male form, a male teacher, one taught and raised within the rabbinic traditions, one looked upon as having some sense of authority and understanding of the sacred texts. Therefore, the women seemed to be in the background, and yet in actuality held a very important role. Often it was to them that I would send my male disciples and simply asked, return to me when your heart is corrected and restored to the simplicity of love, when you've given up questions. And because the heart is open, you long only to give love. I was a man born into a culture like every other. I was a man who asked the questions you have asked. I was a soul who found the answers because I learned to seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all things were restored to me. I came to see that I was as my Father had created me to be, that I was unlimited forever, that I was truly spirit and not just body, and that therefore the body itself could become but a vehicle for love's expression and extension. I walked from village to village and simply taught, God is love, and you are with Him now. I taught the heart to celebrate. I taught my people to set aside the seriousness of the priestly caste and to spend their time playing, to set aside times of celebration and of dancing and of joy, not as a way to invoke the powers of God, but to celebrate the reality of God's presence. I and my Father are one. And indeed, we danced often. We celebrated often. Indeed, precious friends, there arose a bit of dissension. Who is this one that teaches that the soul needs not intercession, that needs not the priestly vows, that need not come to the leaders of the Jewish culture at that time, but need only retire into the quiet of the heart, to be restored into the love of God, and then to seek out those to whom they can give service. For this one teaches even the farmers and the villagers that they have no need to pay homage to to the tradition in which they are born, but to honor that tradition by being the presence only of love. This one makes great waves. What will we do about it? Not all, only some in positions of power. And they went into the political leaders sent from Rome and convinced them that I could cause much damage, create much dissension. And because there had been the hope and the prayer for a Messiah, and many thought that that Messiah would come as a political leader to overthrow the enemies, I began to be feared as a political enemy. Even though I had participated in the healing of many, I came to be seen as one stirring up the pot. It was only then, as I neared the latter days of my ministry, that the full revelation returned to my soul that I had chosen to create a demonstration, a teaching of which could not be denied by anyone, that it is possible to suffer the slings and arrows of this world and overcome anything. I would teach that death is unreal and need not be feared. I journeyed forth one last time into the desert, there to pray and yes, to cry, and to feel the last vestiges of fear, of a moment's doubt, and to give these things over to my Father and ask only that His will be demonstrated through me. His will is only love. There were at those times many travelers that would come from the East. And in one such journey of certain teachers that came from what you know as India, they came and spent much time with a group of the Essenes that were living quite apart from the rest of society. And my uncle and my mother journeyed with me and went to this place in the desert, alone and isolated. And I sat at the feet of these strange men who spoke in a different language that seemed to hold a melody, that seemed to hold a resonance, as you would call it, deep within my soul. It evoked the sense of peace that I felt when I myself read in my native language of Aramaic, as if they were sister tongues singing the same notes from the same song. I became greatly compelled to dive deeper into the philosophical strand that these teachers brought from this distant land. My uncle never once said, "You need to go here now." He waited for me to ask. And so early in my, what you would know, teenage years, I went into him and said, I am called to go to their land. I need to understand their perceptions, their techniques. I need to study with them. He said, my friend, if you go, you may not return. It is a great distance and there is much to learn. Are you willing then to leave family and home? Without a hesitation, being young, I simply said, well, of course. He said, very well. We will make the journey, but first we will return to Egypt for a short while to rest, spend time with friends, and then I will send you on with some of those who will journey with you. Leaving then Egypt, I traveled with a group of about 7 that had been given unto me to protect me, to guide me, who had also been to this land. I did not know it then, but they knew where they were taking me. They seemed to know already who I was to meet, who I was to spend time with. And so we journeyed to what you call India, a very strange land indeed. And yet there seemed to be a pervasive knowledge, a knowledge of the eternality of God's presence. But there were many sects and many creeds even then, and some seemed very much to be attracted to magic, the attempt to invoke the will of God, to gain power over it, to be seen with favor of God. This always troubled me. But I was taken then into what you would know as northern India. And from there, we journeyed to what you call your Himalayan mountain ranges. Here I began to meet certain teachers who emanated a peace that I had seen but rarely. A peace that called to me and immediately brought my mind and emotions to silence. Here I knew there was a knowingness. I spent many, many months with a group of teachers at the foot of the Himalayas, and I learned what you call commonly the ways of yoga. I learned the way of the breath. I learned the way of the body. I learned to fast the body and to get by on very, very little. I was told that this was important. Only later did I know that it was simply a device for taming the restlessness of my adolescent mind that helped me think I was doing some arduous path. It was my entertainment. As I spent time with these teachers, they taught me of the depths of consciousness, revealing to me bit by bit, day by day, that the heart and the source of creation was not outside me at all, but that the feeling I had had as a young child was accurate. That God is but love and can be known by many names. And that which brings the mind to silence and allows the heart to freely and safely be opened by whatever means. This was a true path, a true teaching, a true gift that could be given to anyone. I learned the subtle art of listening, of abiding with another in relationship, thinking not that I knew what my brother or sister needed, but learned to attune ever more deeply to the realization that there is the presence of one teacher that I have called the Holy Spirit, the Comforter, with me at all times, that would whisper unto me the simplicity of what was needed in each moment. I learned that the path of awakening was not one of gaining, but of losing. Not a path of striving, but of allowing. Not a path of the intellect, but a path of the heart. And my practice became the simplicity of remembering God is with me now. And the only time that exists is this moment. And there in that land of very high mountains, yes, I experienced the cold of the snows. I experienced journeying into caves to be alone for weeks at a time. But in time, I saw through the limitations of these techniques. And of my own accord, I left those mountains and journeyed back down into the valleys. And I found my teachers and simply said to them, I think I'm getting it. And they smiled and then said, it is time for you to leave. But before you do so, there is something that must be shared. Unbeknownst to me, they had already known that I was coming to the completion of all my learning that I could gain from them, and had sent message. Had they had telephones, it would have been much easier. My uncle, my father, returned for me. And as I came down to meet with my group of teachers, I was surprised to find that they were with me. And there in a circle, my father shared with me that there was a purpose that awaited me. that there was the need to be like a light piercing the darkness of the culture in which I had been born, and that I was being asked to give indeed of my life to minister unto my own Jewish family, to help remind them of the simplicity of the truth, that there need not be an intermediary between anyone and God, that the priestly caste, the rabbis, the temples, all of the complexities that had been created over a great period of time were not truly necessary, and yet could still be utilized to honor and celebrate the simplicity that I and my Father are one. I did not know at that time that the plan for my life's mission would involve a rather unique demonstration. Therefore, indeed, I allowed the drama to unfold. It was not so much that I directed it. It was already set in motion. I simply allowed it. And when I was asked, "Are you King of the Jews?" I simply replied, "Some say that I am." "Are you the Son of God?" "Do you say that I am?" And I answered every question with a question, for these things mattered not. This began to create much turbulence in my own followers, my friends, for they, just like you, knew their own fears. Some had become dependent upon me. Some indeed hoped that I was the Messiah, the political Messiah that would come and overthrow the Romans through force. Some had come to doubt me and to begin to move away. There were many who loved me, and they could not understand what was about to unfold, even though I taught them, "In 3 days I will raise this temple again, therefore be of good cheer." And they were puzzled. What does he mean? The temple took many years to build. Who is going to cast it down? Who could put the stone upon stone in 3 days? What does he speak of? And some of them began to understand that I spoke of the temple of the body. Therefore understand well that those that were with me were just like you. They were human beings struggling to understand within their own culture how to be at peace with God, how to extend love. What does it mean to awaken? And in that day and that hour that I was given over to the authorities, communication between me and my followers was broken. Even though I had said unto them, "I am with you always." Let no one say unto you that the crucifixion never occurred. If that is true, then my own experience was surely an illusion, and perhaps I had gone mad. The body was crucified, dead and buried. And my followers and friends were scattered. Many of them took upon themselves great sense of guilt and pain. They abandoned my mother, except for a few, and they fled to hide. Some stayed to be close to the action, but not too close, because they did not want to be identified. All of you know the feeling of guilt that comes if you feel you have abandoned someone. The guilt is always an illusion. Understand well then that upon the third day the stone was rolled away, and those that had been closest unto me, the women, who understood and were in communication with me, came forth to discover that something grand was happening. And I indeed appeared unto many. For when you understand that you are not the body, and when you want only love and therefore see nothing else, you too will learn that you are spirit, that you are light divine. You will come to understand that in this very moment, the only reason the body that seems to be yours is with you is because you are choosing from the depth of your compassion to be present in this world. And yet, the truth of who you are has never changed. You remain spirit, and this alone. You are creating a facade through which you can extend love into a world that needs it. Precious friends, my journeys were not unlike your own. You too have traveled to distant cultures. You have studied every spiritual technique there is and has ever been created. You know the pathway of hoping for magic. You know the pathway of doing certain ritual acts to appease God, as if God has ever judged you. Each of you is awakening to the simplicity of the truth that I too as a man learned. I and my Father are one. Here and now, all power of love can move through me by simply relinquishing every perception I have ever held, acknowledging only that love is real, and that what is real can never be threatened, and what is unreal exists not. This truth is diametrically opposed to everything the world would teach you. But as you choose to practice it in each moment, correction comes to the depth of the mind, and the heart opens. Laughter returns to the soul, for appearances no longer have the power to master you. For you see only love, and you have remembered that death in all of its forms is unreal. You remain as you are created to be, and there is no separation between minds that are joined in love. Please understand then what is at hand, for you come to demonstrate in your own lives that there need no longer be reliance upon magical means to invoke the power of God. You are the presence of that power. She worries sometimes and sends the thought, Jeshua, the tape is about to end. Becomes a bit embarrassed when I allow that to be public. Perhaps it is indeed time then to say that this one that you know as Anastasia also journeyed with me at that time, though was male in form. At that time, this one carried a great intelligence, was greatly read and greatly studied, understood the language of Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic. And yet, this one's friends often would not listen. But that's another story. This one too at that time also carried great guilt. Have I failed, my friend Jeshua? This one sat in his pain, letting the words I had spoken reverberate through his mind. In 3 days I will raise this temple up. What did he mean? Darn you, Jeshua. And yet I came and I appeared unto this one, as I did to many of my friends, in various degrees of what you might call density. Understand well, I come to any heart that prepares a place for me. This does not require lifetimes of purification, because guilt is not in you. Perfection is the nature of your being. And the simplicity of abiding with me rests only in your willingness to relinquish the weight of the world, to turn from the roar and the din of what we would call now the voice of ego, which is the collective chaos of the worldly mind, and to abide in a simple acknowledgement. I am as God created me to be. Because all minds are joined, I choose to rest in the presence of an ancient friend who has never left me. Only, of course, if you want to. It is not a requirement for awakening. Teach then this world that I come only as a brother and a friend. As a man, I completed my part in the atonement, and by teaching that death is unreal, I learned it. What? Joshua was saying that when he went to the cross, perhaps there was a doubt. Oh, yes. But if it was true that one receives what one gives, and that as one teaches, one learns, because I knew what I wanted was unlimitedness forever, I allowed the demonstration to be my final lesson as well, to learn that it is true. Death is unreal. And where death is unreal, there can be no thought of sacrifice, and nothing can be lost. There is only all to be gained through remembrance. I am indeed here to be truly helpful wherever here is. For me it seems to be without a body, because it is not the will of the Creator that I assume physical form. And you are coming in your own way to rest into that innocent simplicity of the meek that will come to inherit the earth. Father, what would you have me do this day? Oh, take a nap? Okay. It's very, very simple. What can I do? How can I serve? By being the presence of love. And your gifts will be activated through you. For there is one teacher that knows how to weave the awakening of this world and is already actively involved in it. Therefore seek not to be the supervisor, but the supervised. Trusting the voice for God, as I too learned to hear only that voice. You are the light that lights this world. For if your brothers and sisters are to remember the truth that lives within them, does it not ask that it be demonstrated to them? Therefore, as you teach love, you will receive love. And as you allow yourself to simply be willing that love be given through you, you will come to know that you cannot help but be in the right place at the right time. And here is where you are asked to be, wherever here is. And as you allow that love to be extended through you, you will remember love. and its attraction will grow ever more brighter for you until not one trace of a thought could arise of ever wanting anything else. And then you will see nothing else. And as creation is lifted with you, the veils that seem to show only separation will dissolve as mist before a rising sun, and all of creation will be restored as one and be lifted up unto the heart of God. Reflect then unto this world the simplicity of the truth you have always known, and know that I am with you because I love you. Be you therefore that which you are with each breath, and already the atonement is completed within you, and you are the light that lights this world. Be you therefore at peace this day. Enter the silent chamber of the heart often, not to pray for union with God, but to acknowledge what is and cannot be taken from you. And then celebrate with every breath and with every thought. Let every gentle deed become sacred for you. Let every gentle touch and every smile that you would give into the world, every action becomes the sacred means through which love is expressed through you. Herein lies the end of all teaching. Herein lies the perfection of all gospels. Now is the time come, and the mind of Christ steals gently across the final veils, and knowledge is restored to the holy mind of the Father's one creation, you. Peace be unto you always, you who have come to restore the truth to the consciousness of man.